So today I'm doing something special. Today I'm on MICA campus, and what we're ending up doing is, instead of me talking from the UK and meeting friends across the globe, today what we're going to end up doing is not only just give you a tour of MICA for all those people who have been part of MICA or who've always aspired to be in MICA. What we are going to do is actually enter into the MICA studio and have this wonderful conversation that goes maybe to more connected levels, just because it's a face-to-face conversation. We are going to end up talking with Dr. Ruchi Tewari in this wonderful MICA studio, and I'm just absolutely looking forward to this one, done differently. Thank you so much for being here. And see, the whole idea was to, you're a person who has a lot of richness of conversation with, which comes along with her, right?
Okay.
But I want to actually look at one topic and explore that with you. That is top of your mind. You're somebody who is a communications expert. You're somebody who has seen generations grow up in your teaching career over the course of 20 to 25 years. So you've actually seen millennials and then Gen Zers, and so you're noticing the differences. I would like to add that I know that you have a fine sense of balance because the tremendous yoga practice that you do. What do you think is the dichotomy that maybe Gen Zers are facing today that you notice, and maybe how are we contributing to it, and what is top of your mind? So could you just, that's my first question to you on two things.
Okay, so first, for all the introduction that you made to me, Siddharth, let me tell you that when I started to teach, my first group of students were about 4 years older to me.
Okay.
So I have seen students who were older to me when I began to teach them.
Wow.
So I've actually taught senior students and then grown with them and then grown along with them. So the journey has been very satisfying. But the one thing that I feel has caught me and has got me going along has been these making notes and observations. And one of the things that has really stood out for me has been what you call dichotomy and what I call the demand of the opposites. So I see all of us across all generations, and most predominantly for this generation, a stark stretch of conflicts while existing in a common zone.
So we live in a paradox. We are always in conflict.
We've always lived in paradoxes, but I thought that maybe earlier this wasn't as pronounced. Maybe there were so many other lesser on top of mind things to do that it dissipated this conflict, this dichotomy, this pressure.
So can you explain this a little more to us? I mean, take a step back and maybe explain the conflict.
So here it is.
Yeah.
I'll explain the conflict as human beings, and I'm looking at us, you and me, maybe when we were our 18s, 20s.
Yes.
This push to do well in life, this push to be a good human being, the extremes were narrower. So a good human being could often very likely also be a very successful person, because the demands from the outside world in terms of extremities of what was a successful human being, the ceiling was not beyond the sky.
I see.
We saw limits to how successful we could be by the defined social norms.
I'm hearing from you is that you were getting feedback from the ecosystem.
Constantly.
And so therefore you were shaping yourself on being a good human being and yet having some ambition, let's say.
Yes. And these ambitions were also such that you knew that their implications would be on people around you.
I see.
Because you were dependent on others. These guys who were giving you feedback, who were supporting you grow, you knew you owed something to them, so you have to pour back to them. So this dichotomy, like I mentioned earlier, was narrower. The extremities were not so far.
Okay.
And dependencies were more. You knew that you were a result of a collective others.
Interesting.
Than uniquely me. Now, over a period of time, courtesy the technology coming in, a lot of self and a lot of independence has been sharply fed on. And I think in the last 5 to 7 years, the algorithmic world has ensured that I can just be zoned out into believing and living truthfully, assuming that this is the reality. And this could be a very sharply cut me.
So just to put a question to you on this, did you see this with the millennials, or are you seeing this with Gen Zers? Are you seeing a progression?
It was there earlier also, let me tell you. But there were a few who were generally considered as the crazy ones, the outliers.
I
But
see.
they weren't mainstream. The mainstream were still people who relied on dependencies, large families. You had to know to live with cousins. Cousins were a part of every vacation. The vacations were your family size swelled. Now the vacation means your family size reduces because it could just be with you, with your friends.
Yeah.
It wasn't the case earlier.
Okay.
So what that did was, like I mentioned, you never were very sharply cut out and defined as this is me. The positive was that the pressure was also low.
No, and if I just correlate it with what Gen Z has experienced, I mean, they experienced COVID. They've experienced parasocial relationships.
Yes.
They've experienced nuclear families. So clearly, this must be having some implications.
Hugely, not only nuclear, smaller families also.
Smaller families.
Smaller families. They've also had both parents working.
Yes.
So I knew, even in my generation and the earlier generation, like you were talking, the millennials and before that, so growing up was more natural, which of course provided an opportunity to explore yourself, define yourself.
Right.
You could still find little free moments where others told you something and you just reflected on it.
So you think that these implications have led to some sort of maybe mixed messaging that is going out to Gen Z? Do you think that is having an implication? What is really resulting?
So what I
because of
feel
all
is
of
what's
this?
resulted is that this change has been just very fast,
Okay.
very sudden, and I feel that the millennials and the generation before that needs to take responsibility to understand that they haven't given up on what they thought was ideal. They're demanding the best of both the worlds.
So you have to be the norm and then you have to be the exception.
All the time.
All the time. So you have to be norm, you have to be exception. You
And
have to be both.
excel in both.
And excel in both. Interesting.
So that I feel is a dichotomy, and that is what I feel is often resulting in what we see now as issues of stress, issues of depression. They're bound to happen because where are your vents? In class, you can distinctly see some students unable to pay attention for a long time.
I see.
Right? They are probably instinctively driven to some activity, whether it's a fidget, or it's the mobile phone, or it's just this random bending to talk to someone, maybe fixing themselves if nothing else.
Right.
The hair,
Yeah.
the twitch.
Yeah.
And I feel that this wasn't the case maybe 8-10 years ago, because I know that generation was not constantly logged in. So then you could afford to be logged in one thing. And additionally, I also feel that Gen Z has had the pressure of multitasking all the time. Till a point that it becomes a way of being, which means you're listening to a teacher and you're looking at the phone.
Yeah.
And they can afford to do both.
I mean, in
above
digital, we
average.
have statements for this, like, oh, this is second screen behavior and
Yes,
stuff like that. We've
yes.
kind of normalized that, isn't
yes.
it? Yeah.
So probably, and for the generation, it means that I will inevitably always be doing 2 to 3 things at the same time.
You know what I'm finding fascinating about what you're saying, and this is a really new perspective that I'm learning, is the fact that you are not only looking at the symptoms about the fidgeting or the screen behavior, but you're actually seeing it as a play that is coming from a clash of value systems and different feeding in that's going in across generations.
Yes, in fact, Siddharth, I wouldn't even call it a clash, I feel it's just coming together, the traffic merging. And when there's traffic merging,
that's what
then
happens.
There's a bicycle and a four-wheeler and a Lamborghini. It's a typical Indian street.
So let me now, okay, so we've understood the problem, okay, but now I'm asking you to put your expert hat on, okay, and let's, maybe you don't have the perfect solution, none of us maybe
I'm sure
have,
I don't.
but do you have any inklings, do you have any sparks of hope wherein clearly the situation and the system and the parents you can't change, but an educator and you're seeing people in this, what advice, what ideas do you give to Gen Z to change up whatever they've got? Probably, that is something that I could kind of brainstorm with you, kind of find out.
So maybe the one thing that I'll say is that very clearly this is not an individual problem, but it definitely can have individual solutions. And here's what I mean.
Okay.
When you are saying that so many things you can't change, but I also feel that they will change as a result of the dominoes effect. And here is what I mean. Because I've been teaching communication, I've been working with communication, I feel the solution lies with communication. But the problem is that communication is hugely misunderstood as speaking to the other, but it's never understood as speaking to yourself. So in discussions with a couple of my other colleagues also, and a couple of people from the industry, I think this is a good term, and I was just talking about it with somebody about self-gaze loosely relates to reflection, but I feel reflection is a very big thing. Maybe once in a while, just pull yourself out of yourself and look at yourself. That means give it an outside-inside perspective. See yourself as you appear to others. And this is not only for Gen Z, but for everybody. For Gen Z specifically, if you can just log out and let the big dust settle, you then probably realize that everything is not so demanding. It's just not you who's the center of the universe. You're just one little know nothing in the larger world, but you are the most important person for yourself.
Okay.
So, like I mentioned, communicate.
Yeah.
Have a disciplined life.
Yes.
By discipline, I'll repeat, I'm not saying live the yogic life, not possible for us. Have a discipline, routine. Learn to do the same thing n number of times till you're bored, and then you begin to enjoy the boredom that comes to you.
Interesting.
And
enjoy the boredom.
Yes, and some things have to be done regularly, one of which is some form of exercise.
Yeah.
And it can't be mentally thinking that I'm going to work out. That's not any form of exercise, but some physical exercise.
Okay.
And finally, I think if you do all of this, it'll be very easy for you to accept saying, I think I goofed up. I'll speak it out.
Yeah.
Talk it out. 90% of the problem is sorted. Because that humbles you.
Yeah.
It lets the other person know what you're going through.
Yes.
If you talk it out, I know what's happening to you.
Yes.
I'm sure I'm going to help you through this. I mean, expressing vulnerabilities doesn't make you a weaker person. You've got to be very strong to come out as vulnerable and say, I think I messed up, I'm restarting. So if you can log out and reboot.
You've provided not just sparks, but some really good solutions, and these are really fantastic because they're grounding. They're either you're connecting with your body means that you're kind of disconnecting or at least taking a step back from your mind.
Yes.
And talking to yourself before you're talking to anybody else is so critical.
Absolutely.
And discipline equals kind of a freedom, actually.
Totally, yes.
Isn't it?
Completely, yes.
Discipline equals freedom.
Which is another dichotomy.
Yeah, it is a dichotomy. Maybe to be discussed the next time round.
Yes, totally it.
Ruchi Tewari, thank you so much. What a fantastic conversation that was. My God, there's so many learnings out of such a short conversation. That's what the beauty of Two Things is, right? Because when we looked at any sort of idea that we are exploring, and that's what we explored with Ruchi as to how Gen Z is coping up with the dichotomy that it's facing, the feedback that it's getting from earlier generations, and how it's dealing with the amplification that is coming through social media. We looked at the potential implications on Gen Z, and not just that, we also looked at potential solutions which were around connecting with the body, disconnecting with the mind, and also just the whole discipline aspect. And probably the biggest takeaway for me was to accept and enjoy boredom. Fantastic. On to more new Two Things.